Call the meeting to order, and we're going to make this very short, save everybody a lot of time. Rick Givens, the planning consultant for the Redwood Landing hearing, is requesting a continuance, and so our meeting is going to consist of, I will read their letter, and then we are going to adjourn, and then the meeting for this will be on December 11th. So, and the reason for that is that they want to talk to more of the neighbors, get more neighborhood input, and which makes sense to me considering the volume of input from the community. They're going to be asking for more input from you folks. So I'm gonna read the letter, and it'll go into the public record, and then we will adjourn. So it's written to Brian Brown, Planning Director. Dear Brian, we will be requesting a continuance at the Planning Commission meeting tonight. We need additional time to actively work with our property neighbors in designing our project to better align with their wants and with the North Redwood Master Plan. We propose that the meeting be continued until December 11th, 2017, in order to allow time to do additional site planning work regarding shadow plats for off-site properties. We are sending you this letter at this time so that you can send it out via email to any of the neighbors for whom you may have email addresses. We want to avoid the inconvenience to them of coming to the meeting unnecessarily. Assuming that the Planning Commission is amenable to our request for a continuance, we will not be making a presentation tonight because the site plan could change as we try to address the neighbors' concerns. Thank you for your assistance with this matter. Please let me know if you need any further from me. Sincerely, Rick Givens. So I don't think we need a motion or anything other than to adjourn.
So be it.
So we
have another hearing as well.
Pardon me?
We have MLP 17-07 as well.
Where are you looking at?
Minor partition.
Yeah, so maybe if you, it's rather than adjourning, just make a motion to
Which would be December 11th.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just postpone the whole thing until December 11th. So it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn, and this entire packet will...
No. We're just not adjourning, we're just postponing the one public hearing item.
I'll make the motion. Mr. Chair, I would move that we continue the SUB 17-06 North Redwood Landing subdivision to a date certain in the future of December 11th, 2017.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So Brian, do we move on with the other?
Yeah, so now I just pick up at the regular
Okay.
process of the agenda now.
Okay. Then if we could stand for the invocation and the flag salute. Lord bless this meeting and all of its participants that came to the meeting to voice their concerns. Bless the Planning Commission. Let everybody get home safely. Your name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Sorry about the confusion. So, do we have any citizen input on non-agenda items? Yes. If you could come forward, just for the record.
I just sort of like to submit written testimony for the one you just continued.
Sure, with Laney. Yes, that would be fine. Do we have any citizen input on non-agenda items? Okay. We need to approve the minutes of the October 23rd meeting. I have a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
I'll second.
For October 23rd.
Been moved and seconded to approve the meeting minutes for the October 23rd Planning Commission. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Any new business? Brian? Okay. Then we will consider a minor land partition at 159 Northeast 10th Avenue, MLP 17-07, Will Snyder. And the matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please be prepared to step forward to the microphone at the appropriate time. State your name, mailing address, and interest in the matter. For those people other than the applicant that are interested in testifying as either proponents or opponents, please sign in on the sheet or speak up when we call for testimony. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be given 5 minutes each, the opponents will be given 5 minutes each, and those thought to be neutral on the matter will be given 5 minutes each. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to become a part of the record. All written testimony received both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it is only to concur with previous testimony. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest to please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Snyder is a close personal friend of mine and a client, and I have interest in the approval of this, so I'm going to recuse myself tonight.
Okay. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. Yeah, same thing. Yeah. Okay. No. Okay. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any commissioner regarding conflict of interest or ex parte contact? Okay. I think four is
That's a majority.
Four is a quorum. Yes. Yeah. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. First, we'll have the staff report, and then questions, if any, by the hearing body. Then the applicant, not more than 15 minutes. Proponents, not more than 5 minutes each. Opponents, not more than 5 minutes each. Persons that are neutral will have not more than 5 minutes each. And then rebuttal by the applicant, not more than 10 minutes. That time will close the public testimony. Then there will be some questions by the hearing body. We'll discuss and deliberate, and no additional testimony unless specifically allowed by the chair. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure outlined for this hearing? Okay, hearing none. Brian?
Thank you, Chair Savory, and good evening, Commissioners. The hatched area on this map shows you the tract that is proposed for subdividing, and you'll see that it's adjacent to another flag lot. It has an arm that heads out to 10th Avenue, and there's a driveway in that arm serving that property today. So one of the first things when this was contemplated is we asked the applicant to visit with that neighboring property owner to see if they would agree to allow a shared common use of that existing driveway so we wouldn't have another side-by-side driveway as a result of this. They declined and were not interested. Therefore, they're taking this property and they're proposing another arm side by side with the adjacent arm there. And so you're going to have two driveways that are side by side. Our regulations changed in 2012, and they ask for a 10-foot separation between driveways on local streets. And to achieve that, you usually try to keep your driveway as it approaches the public street 5 feet off of an extension of the property line straight out into the street. If you have 5 feet from your property line on each property, you'll achieve that 10-foot separation. The adjacent driveway was built right on the property line, so we're not going to achieve the 10-foot separation, but this proposal has proposed to do what they can by being 5 foot away from the property boundary where the driveway will meet the street. And so that's as good as we can get in this particular case. If we don't provide that exception for the 10-foot separation requirement, this partition wouldn't be possible to do. And one of the reasons that people do partitions like this is because they have an oversized existing parcel, and for efficient utilization of our land within the community, they would like to do a flag lot minor partition, which will give access to the property that's in the back to the public street by making the flag lot arrangement. In this particular case, I don't know how closely you might have looked at the drawing, but we failed to get the revised drawing that was submitted by the applicant in the packet, in which they adjusted the property boundary between the two proposed lots, which is this boundary right here, so that it's actually about 19 feet away from this existing house, and that's to satisfy the 15-foot rear property setback requirement. This drawing doesn't, the first drawing submitted didn't represent that, but we do have a drawing that's, I guess I can't see it from here, but this is the correct drawing. We've put in the slide program now, but I think the one in your packet says it's 14 feet, and it's
But
really,
it's 19?
it's really 19 feet
Okay.
separation. So that changes the square footage of the lots. They're both 7,000 some square feet in size. They started out with a 15,597 square foot lot, which is a very large lot. And so there is room for them to do that and to do it with, because of the placement of the existing home, and meet the required setbacks around that existing home. Because of the distance of the arm, which is the distance from here to the street being less than 100 feet, they're only required a minimum 12-foot wide paved access. And so my understanding is that's approximately what they're planning to do on the driveway width. And that helps them keep the separation from this property line here where there's another drive by setting that back a little ways, the actual paved surface. So when it comes down here, they're angling it a little bit further so that they get the 5-foot separation as it connects to the public street. About the only other thing that was mentioned is that, and the only public input that I know of that we've received was from our city engineer, and the conditions that he mentioned, the most important is that a 6-foot wide sidewalk will be required to be constructed in front of the frontage of the existing tract, so the sidewalk, except for where this new driveway is coming, would be across this whole frontage here. And so that will be, even though you have an existing house, when you partition, the existing frontage is what needs the sidewalk. So that is a condition of approval, as indicated in the staff report. The conditions that the city engineer recommended are all part of the requirement. The other things that he mentioned are that the existing driveway needs to be removed and constructed to today's ADA standards. And a new driveway to Lot 2 would be constructed with ADA standards. And then we'd have sanitary and sewer will go up the access arm to serve the lot that's in the back for its future development for a single-family home. The other unique condition in our staff report talked about on number 1 is that parcel 2 in the back that's available for a new home is going to be subject to our residential infill standards. And to remind you, that's when you have a situation where you have 2 existing homes over 5 years old that are within 25 feet of a common property boundary of what you're creating. Then it's an infill situation, and we try to protect those existing homes from the possibility of a 2-story house going where there's existing 1-story homes. So if that is indeed the case here, then he'll be subject to the infill standards that have the step-up height standard for the 2nd story of the home, so you don't end up with a 2-story wall 7 feet within the boundary of your existing 1-story home. Other than that, that's all of the other conditions that are in staff report are all standard conditions. Nothing really unique to this particular request. So any questions of me, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions? Brian?
The new sidewalk, is it going to be curb tight?
Yes, we specifically asked that question of the city engineer, and part of the issue is that the city has been working for over 15 years to secure easements along 10th Avenue from approximately Ivy, might be Locust, might be Ivy, all the way past the fairgrounds. Some of those efforts have been involved trying to form a CDBG grant project, but we've had difficulty in securing voluntary sidewalk easements from every property owner. And when doing that, it was a design that was going to have a curb-tight sidewalk all the way along. So yes, it's going to be curb-tight, and we hope that at some point in the future, if not a CDBG project, it will be a city-funded project. We'll be putting in the rest of the sidewalk. And if we still don't have 1 or 2 easements, we'll put the rest of the sidewalk in. And maybe that will put pressure on the final holdouts to see how ridiculous it is that they don't agree to a fair market value for an easement across their property so that we can finish the sidewalk.
Any other questions? Do we have a proponent here that would like to speak in favor of this project? Okay. You could come forward, state your name and address. And you'll have approximately 15 minutes.
My name is Will Snyder. I live at 626 Northwest Territorial Road. I'm here representing White River Homes, who is the applicant here. So our primary goal, this will be our third partition within a one-block radius of this property. We'll have built 4 infill homes within a one-block radius of this location. One of the owners of White River Homes, Snyder Construction, lives across the street from this property and knows the prior owners of the property very well. Our primary goal in buying the property from the prior owners is so that we can ensure that when it was partitioned, which it was going to be inevitably partitioned, that we could really have the neighborhood's influence in mind. So we're going to be building a one-level house. We're going to keep the lot. We're going to be building it. We are builders here in town. We live in town. I did not want to see another developer from outside of town to come in and buy this and build a 2-story house, which is going to be more economical. There'll be a bigger return for building a 2-story house, but I do not want to see a 2-story house built there. So that was our primary goal in purchasing this. And the secondly is also to help the sellers at that 159 Northeast 10th Avenue to purchase their property to give them financial relief so they could move on. I pretty much agree with everything that Planning Director has asked. The one thing I would ask, though, is that we are not required to put a sidewalk in. There is no sidewalks anywhere on 10th currently between Ivy all the way down to basically Pine. So we will be spending probably between $5,000 and $6,000 to put in a sidewalk here that will go nowhere for who knows how long. I do know that the city has been planning for 15 years, as the director has said, trying to put sidewalks in. If and when that does come through, the cost to put that sidewalk in will be probably 50 cents on the dollar what it will cost me, because it will be a very large job. So for me to hire a contractor to put it in, it's going to be very expensive, and it will provide no utility for anybody for the foreseeable future. That would be my only request, is that there is no sidewalk required.
Any questions for Mr. Snyder? Okay. Thank you. Are there any other proponents, people that wish to speak in favor of this project? Are there any opponents that would like to speak on this matter? Are there... Okay, Mr. Canby? Canberra. If you're up, you get to have your chance here. If you could just state your name and address, please, that would be great.
My name is Bob Canberra, or Robert Canberra. My address is 1338 North Maple. And is that all you need?
Yep.
Okay. I want to pose I really want to speak in favor of the present Planning Commission's requirements to have a sidewalk. My wife and I both use 10th a lot as far as walking, and presently it presents a real hazard to, I think, any pedestrian that tries to walk in this city. The drivers are quite aggressive on 10th, and there are not the city hasn't globally provided sidewalks on some of our busy streets. They have done a terrific job on trying to implement sidewalks on a lot of their developments. I think the plan to put in sidewalks implementally, okay, gives a good message to 10th, all the residents on 10th, that this is something that's really needed in our community. And I think the Planning Commission's steady and consistent effort to require sidewalks whenever there's a change is a step in the right direction that this commission should continue to advocate for and reinforce. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents or people that are neutral, consider themselves neutral, and wish to speak on that? If you would step forward, state your name and address, and you have about 5 minutes.
Yes, my name is Dan Smith, and I live at 187 Northeast 10th Avenue. I and my wife are the owners of the flag lot, the adjacent driveway that goes back through there. Neutral on the idea. I understand that its property owner wants to divide his line. That's fine within the requirements that the city puts forth. The things that I would like to speak to is maybe a few, Mr. Snyder has stated that he is intending to build a one-story house. I would like to maybe see that stipulated because, all the other homes in the area are one stories. Mine is a story and a half, built it 25 years ago. If I had to do it over again, I'm not sure that I would. And at the time I built it, there was no other infills, and I was very far from neighboring structures when I built in the center of the block. There's one other requirement I would like to maybe get your consideration on. There is a large redwood tree in the southwest corner of the new parcel. And I don't think it would impact the placing of a structure on the parcel 2 and would like to see it protected. It is right up against a redwood that's on my side of the property. I'm afraid if one's cut down, it would harm the other one. And they're tall and been there for years. One thing that the planning director had mentioned was that my driveway was on the property line, and that's not quite correct. It is off of the property line, and it was placed there as a requirement and placed in a matter as a requirement of the building permit that I received at the time when I built. That we actually wanted to put in a narrower driveway, and we tried to appeal that and were denied. The other thing I would like to speak of is Mr. Snyder and his request not to put sidewalks through all the way across parcel 1 and the short driveway across parcel 2. I would speak in favor of that and encourage the Planning Commission to consider that as a variance for him. There are no other sidewalks within up and down 10th for a couple of blocks or better. And I think just a short area there would be somewhat out of place. And, when I initially built, I had 3 feet on either side of my driveway, and the city was talking about putting in a drive, making sidewalks a requirement. My builder went to the city and pointed out how ridiculous it would look for a 3-foot section of sidewalk there. And at the time was granted the variance. And so I would speak in favor of that. I don't think it distracts from the neighborhood. 10th Avenue is a very wide street, very little parking, some parking, but very little considering it doesn't occur that much usually on the street there. And so there's a lot of separation between the vehicles and pedestrians that walk along the curb. So.
Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your consideration.
Are there any other neutral parties that would like to speak? Mr. Snyder, do you have some rebuttal that you would like to address?
To specifically address the concern for the redwood tree on the southwest corner, we haven't looked closely at that. Personally, I love trees. We've had to remove, in one of our partitions, we had to remove a tree because the tree was literally in the middle of the buildable area, but it is never our goal to remove a tree. So if the tree does not impact the development of the house, we will not move. The only reason why we would remove the tree would be because of a development impact. Best case scenario, we'll probably just limit up a little bit so it doesn't overhang into the gutters area. But we are very, very, very fond of trees and what they do. And then secondly, like he suggests, when you have 2 trees that are close together, you take one down, it's going to really impact the other tree. And we don't want to create that as well.
Any questions? Thank you. Okay, I guess that's it for testimony, so I'll close the public testimony portion of this. Is So any questions for any, I guess we're into discussion and deliberation. So what are your thoughts on this, Mr. Serlin?
Well, I would like to see sidewalks all the way down 10th. It's a fairly busy street and cars go quite quick down there. I live 1 block away from it, and so I'm pretty familiar with that area. But it really doesn't make a lot of sense to just do one small section, although it does one of our requirements, city requirements, but it's not going to prove any value of who's going to use it for a few feet and then have to go back out in the street again when you're walking your dog. I'm glad to hear Mr. Snyder's intentions to save the tree. I concur with that wholeheartedly. I think 1 story is what we should have in that. 2-story would look totally out of place because all through that area are low houses, and so 1 story is what I would advocate for, and those are my feelings.
Okay. Eric?
I think it's pretty straightforward. We've done these before, and I think this is compliant to that. I'm probably more of an advocate for the sidewalks, just because you got to start somewhere, and that's why that code is there. So you got to continue to build upon that, and I agree that it's maybe the first one that's being built there, but you got to start somewhere. Hopefully the city does continue to build that, because I think there's also a safe for the kids to go to school, those kind of things that to me is a important piece of our code. So I am a proponent of that. It's not going to stop me from not going along with the group, but I am a proponent of doing that. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. I think the builder's being compliant to a lot of the items that that the neighbors are looking for, and I think he's trying to be a good neighbor.
I would agree with the other 2 commissioners that improving the section of sidewalk along the frontage is a standard. Just about every city you go to, whether it's Canby or any of our neighbors, it's a common standard to have. You got to start somewhere. You know, you might have this development this year, and then another development next year, and another development down the road the following year, and all of a sudden we've got some sidewalks there. And maybe they connect, maybe they don't. And the city comes in and builds the rest of them. So I'm a proponent of sidewalks as well for safety and other reasons.
I'm with Mr. Serlin on the sidewalk issue. I think that having just 1 section of sidewalk is, while they're nice, and you do have to start somewhere, I drive up and down 10th, and it is pretty wide. I don't know that a sidewalk in this particular case is going to particularly get a ball rolling that may not roll very far for the next decade. So that would be my thought on that. I like the idea that we're going to save the tree. That's fantastic, and I agree that it should be, if you build on it, should be a 1-story house. So, having said that, we're kind of split on the sidewalk issue, but that is, I'm rather ambivalent about it, but I don't know that should be a requirement. Be nice if. Comment on that? Sure. If you could come back up and.
So, yeah, as a resident of Canby, I love sidewalks too. The only reason I'm against sidewalks in this particular case is there will be no future development in this block ever unless zoning changes. There is no other lots big enough for future partitions, and I don't foresee zoning changing anytime soon. So that's why in this particular case, I feel that starting someplace is good. This is not the place, because there is going to be no future development ever, short of a zoning change.
So there will be, in your mind, since there's no further development, there will be no systems development charges or fees to go along with that, to build sidewalks, is that correct?
Well, there'll be no opportunity for the planning commission, for the Canby Building Department to require sidewalks. So let's say the neighbor to the west, the lot's not big enough for a partition. So and that was built, most of those houses were built in the 50s, early 60s. So there will be no way for other than the city putting sidewalks in those houses, there will be no other partitions or developments of property that would require a sidewalk to go in. So this sidewalk, if this sidewalk did go in, it would be the only sidewalk there until the city puts the sidewalks in on the rest of 10th, because there is no other future partitions capable in that block area.
And do you want to address that?
So one of the things that staff was concerned about when the city engineer recommended the ordinance standard that you place a 6-foot sidewalk across the frontage of a partition is where should it be? And we were aware of our past efforts to try to secure easements, and apparently there must be some wider right-of-way in this section of 10th Avenue, whereas further east it's a little bit narrower, and so we don't actually need to secure a 5-foot wide sidewalk easement from these properties. We can build the sidewalk within the existing right-of-way here. On the rest of the distance on eastward, we need to secure a 5-foot wide sidewalk easement, and that's what the city has been trying to do for 15 years before we could have a successful project. And we also needed some grant funding to help fund that. The city's now has the mindset that we're going to do it with our own money, but we don't have it prioritized exactly when that's going to happen at this point. I'm trying to think what else I was going to say about that. So our concern was we want to make sure when we do a small segment that since we think the rest of it will be a city project, that it will align when we do the city project. So that's what we were asking the city engineer is where should the placement be? And he felt that if it was curb tight, it would then align with the other sidewalk that the city would build in the future that we would secure by 5-foot easements on the private property, and it would be in alignment. At least that's what it appears. And so with that assurance, we said, okay, it's reasonable to go ahead and do it at this time, although the Planning Commission in the past years have done it both ways. They've heard these two arguments many times before, and they have waived some of them, and some of them they have not, depending on the particular location, the need for it. Is it going to be torn out in the future, and the biggest argument I've heard when they were waived is exactly what's being presented here, is that the only opportunity for finishing the sidewalk is a city project. And I would agree that that's true. That's not necessarily a reason to waive it, though, but it is a fact.
Having said that, and that it's been going on for 15 years, I don't know that having a standalone sidewalk, thereby it's a little lonesome for the next 15 years, is going to. I would ask that my feeling is we should waive the 6-foot sidewalk requirement. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there.
I'd like to rebut.
Okay, yeah, come forward, state your name and address. I know you've done it before, but, you know, for the record, just in case new people walk in.
My name is Robert Canberra. I live in 1338 North Maple. You know, one of the basics that has prevented 10th to already have sidewalks was the lack of people willing to provide voluntary easements to that. This seems unbelievably inconsistent that somebody is going to be granted an exception to providing the sidewalk that we want in the first place. if everyone on that street had given the easements all that we had wanted as a city, it would be done. But it's not done because we keep making these exceptions based upon the fact that the project hasn't been completed. Well, it hasn't been completed because we can't get these things done. I mean, I believe the city has made a commitment to doing the right thing for a large portions of your city. If you look at what the work they've done on Ivy, on Grant, on Redwood, going all the way from 99 through to 13th, these are good examples of when the city puts together, they have sidewalks on both sides of their streets. In many of those streets, they have bike paths, they have parking on one side of the street that provides, a lot of movement and safety. The pedestrians and the citizens' right to move in the city has been guaranteed on those kinds of developments. This is another example of a street that needs it, that should be done. Every possible decision needs to be in support of that eventual plan. Thank you.
One other comment I'd like to make. According to the tax lot map that was provided to us in the application here, it looks like the property 2 lots down on 10th going west appears to be bigger than this property, and then also the property directly south of this property is larger than the subject property. So it looks like there's at least 2 properties that are larger than the project that we're talking about that could potentially be developed or sub-partitioned. I'm not sure where the homes are situated, but just from looking at the tax lot map, it looks like they could be partitioned and frontage improvements would be made where sidewalk could be built.
Somebody stated earlier, the homes that you're referring to, the lots are ranch-style homes, and they basically run parallel to 10th, pretty much borderline to borderline. I mean, they're not right on, but they're large enough. It's basically going to preclude building on those properties, short of tearing down the existing structures and redoing everything. So I don't see that that's going to be a player in the near future, short of rezoning and a lot of things changing.
Chair, I got a question for Brian, if I could. Brian, is that something we can require of this to grant that easement so that it's not something the city has to fight for this spot?
Well, for this property, we don't need the easement because there is enough right-of-way to construct the sidewalk within the right-of-way. That's my understanding.
So when you go through and you get the other neighbor's voluntary contribution to this, you won't need that from this property owner.
No.
You just go in and build it.
That's right. Yeah, so at a minimum, we would be arguing that we secure the necessary right-of-way or easement if we needed it, if you weren't going to make them build the sidewalk itself. But we don't need the easement, or we have enough right-of-way for the sidewalk here.
Okay.
And we don't anticipate having any more right-of-way dedicated except a 5-foot easement on private property for a sidewalk purpose, because that is much less expensive to achieve than taking 5 foot of property just to get a right for a sidewalk on their property is what we'd be asking for on the other properties.
So I'm clear, so there's nothing...
Not on this one. We have the right of way on this property.
So they can't refuse in any way, shape, or form that sidewalk can't be
If the
done?
city wanted to do a sidewalk project that include this project, we have the right-of-way already secured for this property.
Okay.
Since I think that sidewalks are important, and when the city goes in to build sidewalks, it will be built on the in front of this property in any event. Do I have that right, Brian?
Our current plans include this property and all the way to Ivy and all the way east. And we may need to do it in 2 or 3 phases to get the whole thing done. But I'm pretty confident in a couple of years, at least phase 1 is going to be started. I don't know which end they're going to start from, though.
Does that change your thinking about,
It does. I just want to make sure that that we don't put more stress on the city trying to procure those and to be able to do the sidewalk. If the city's going to do it, it's a project, and the builder's correct. They're going to get it for a lot cheaper to build that section. And as long as they can do it, yeah, I mean, as long as they're allowed to do it and they can't stop it from happening, it doesn't become more of a problem.
I might just volunteer that we've had a couple instances in 10 or 20 years where we've taken a fee in lieu of the construction of the sidewalk. Well, it's still going to cost him about the same money as building it, so you might as well build it. But some people have chosen to pay the city a fee. Unfortunately, we're not good trackers of that money.
You got to set up a special escrow.
It takes systems and such, and it hasn't been done very often. But we were reminded, I just thought of it, we were reminded from money that we collected, fee in lieu of the improvement, about last year sometime for a payment that was collected about 12 years ago. And lo and behold, when we checked our records, yes, we had that money. You know, everybody had forgotten about it. Please.
Price is expensive when 12 years later, I'm sure.
Yeah, so that's the trouble with doing the fee in lieu as well. And if you're going to contribute the money, it's that argument that, well, it's the only sidewalk here and there's none that connect to it, but at least the city doesn't have to spend that money in the future because we've collected the money for it and saved it somewhere. So I don't advocate that system. I think you either prove it or you don't.
well, I would like to move that we approve this project without the 6-foot sidewalk requirement. Yep. That's it. Otherwise, it's fine.
Yep.
Have a second?
Second.
Just a clarification of that motion, it does include, per the conditions of approval recommended by staff.
Right,
For me.
but does not require the 6-foot.
And did you want to put something about restricting to a one-story house? I might make a comment about that, is that, you know, that isn't an ordinance criteria. So you're somewhat stepping out of your bounds if you were to do that, because the city doesn't have any private property tree restrictions, except for those that have deemed to be a street tree that was planted as a requirement through a site and design review or a partition or a subdivision. This tree in the backyard that's many, many years old is a private tree that isn't a street tree. We currently don't have any restrictions on their removal. You know, that doesn't mean you couldn't have a one-story home or a restriction on not cutting down the tree. If you have a somewhat amenable applicant, which he said he was, but otherwise you could potentially be challenged since it's not a review criteria.
I'd
It's
like
not
to
a
add
code
that
item.
in, if possible.
Okay.
And I think I'd be able to support the project.
So why don't you go ahead and make an amended proposal?
I'd like to move that we, or motion that we approve the
MLP 17-07 Will Snyder.
MLP-17-07 Will Snyder, per the city's recommended conditions of approval, without a 6-foot sidewalk along the frontage, but also restricting the structure to be no more than 1 story in height, and preserving the existing tree in the southwest corner of the property.
We have a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There you go. Thank you. We will now, final decisions for SUB 17-05, the 7 acres Sprague subdivision.
Yes, there, see if I can remember now, there was, in the preparation of this findings, I just thought I'd let you know, we have a provision in the city's subdivision regulations that indicate that when the, how's it worded? The prevailing, when a decision was made, the prevailing applicant, the one that was approved, I'm really,
This is the one that we just
yeah,
did.
so this was the 22
October
lots.
23rd.
Yeah, the 22 lot subdivision.
On Maple?
The provision says that when they're represented by an attorney, that the attorney has a right to review and assist in preparing the findings. So in this particular case, I prepared the findings, sent them off to the applicant's attorney, and he added and edited and to these. And during that edit, there was one question that came up as to, and we listened to the tape as well, as to what your intent was when you asked that we have a condition of approval that the rear yards along the farm property have a fence. There was a question, that was a given, but what we weren't quite certain is whether you meant to also include a fence along the logging road trail, because it was explained at the meeting that the applicant was considering voluntarily putting up a fence along the logging road trail. And it's currently written, I think, that it adds that as a condition as well.
But
And so the applicant is fine with that because they've added it into the findings that they will construct or have a fence constructed either by the individual property owners or themselves along the farm property and along the logging road trail. Is that, Katie, is that where we're at?
Yeah, we would prefer not to have it, but
Okay.
if, if that's the intent, then.
Okay, she wanted to make sure that she covered things well, and I wanted to bring it up because I wasn't sure that you guys had required the fence along the logging road trail. And so I just wanted to make that clarification. It's written as a requirement right now. We're not sure if that's what you did or not, or what your intent was.
I think that was, from my point of view, that was the intent. Good fences make for good neighbors, and having that area not fenced along the walking trail, you're going to get dogs going into people's yards, and it just makes sense to fence it.
that was my thought as well.
Yes.
Okay, we good? Did I answer that question? You good?
Yes.
Okay. So, final decision for SUB 17-05, the 7 acres Sprague subdivision. Move to approve.
Mr. Chair, I will move that we approve SUB 17-05, 7 acres Sprague subdivision, final findings.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. We'll move on to a final decision for MLP 17-07, Will Snyder.
Mr. Chair, I recommend approval MLP 1707 for the applicant Will Snyder with the conditions that we spoke of earlier.
Have a second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and then we have delayed the hearing for SUB 17-06 North Redwood Landing subdivisions until December 11th. Okay, items of interest from you, Brian.
All right, so we've got just a note on here that I wanted you to be aware of, that your decision that you made on the South Ivy subdivision, that was Alan Manuel's, was appealed. We've received an appeal statement, and if you have any interest in seeing that appeal statement, that will be presented to the city council on,
Speak into the mic.
I think it's December 6th is the hearing date with the city council that it'll be on. I just wanted you to be aware of that, because I'm not sure if all of you have been subject to having one of your decisions appealed or not, and if you want to follow that through its process at the city council.
I think the only decision that we've had appealed to the city council was the subdivision over
South of Fred Meyer.
south of Fred Meyer, yeah, in the industrial district. So that, as far as I know, that's the only one. Okay.
Then the other item that's listed there is that we don't have any current items for the next regularly scheduled meeting for November 27th, so staff is suggesting that we cancel that meeting. And then we're going to have a very, very busy one on December 11th.
Thank you, Brian. Any items of interest or guidance from us to staff? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Chair, I motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.